guys, welcome back to 1237, back with another review. Now, like my last review, which was for the 2020 film Run, this is another film from Hulu that is not a blind first time watch. This is one that I've seen before. I saw this a few months ago on Hulu, and I meant to do a review of it, never got around to it. I don't remember why. So, there's actually a few that I want to go back and rewatch and review, and this is another one. And it's one that I really liked the first time I saw it. uh, I still have some of the same positives as the first time I saw it, but there's new flaws or negatives that I have with it that I didn't have the first time. And I remember when I remember seeing a trailer for this back in 2018 when it was being advertised. And there's a huge thing in the marketing about how this was filmed, and that seemed very interesting. And it's the 2018 film Unsane, which is directed by Steven Soderbergh, who's a very well-received director. I mean, he's directed Sex Lies Videotape, uh, Traffic, Aaron Brockovich, films like that, to movies like the Oceans films, this, and a bunch of other ones. This is one of his more experimental films because this was all shot entirely on an iPhone 7. Specifically, I think it was the iPhone 7S Plus. The iPhone 7 Plus. Shot entirely. And that was the big thing in the marketing, like all shot on an iPhone. Which I think there was a few movies that came out around that time where that was like the big thing, showing either how easy it is to make films or what the iPhone can do. But also the premise seemed very interesting, which I'll get to. And it actually feels like two movies that don't really blend very well. But yeah, it was directed by Steven Soderbergh, written by Jonathan Bernstein and James Greer. Stars Claire Foy, who played Lisbeth Salander in The Girl in the Spider's Web. She was in Vampire Academy. Joshua Leonard from the Blair Witch Project, and a bunch of other cameos in other horror films. Jay Farrow, who I'm pretty sure was or is on SNL, has been for a while. Juno Temple, Amy Mullins, and Amy Irving. Sue's mother from, no, not Sue's mother. Sue Snell from the original Carrie. She's in this. And there's a very surprising but very well done cameo by Matt Damon. Just showing that Matt Damon is the king of cameos. The cinematography was done by, is credited as Peter Andrews, which is Soderbergh's father's name. Sometimes he takes cinematography credits as either his mother or father. Music was done by David Wilder Savage. And the music was very minimalistic but effective, especially just that sort of gothic organ sound in the very opening and the very closing. And yeah, put out 2018, made for 1.5 million, which is incredibly cheap. Made 14.3 million, so it was a sizable hit, even though that's, by regular standards, that's not a whole lot of money. But yeah, for being shot on an iPhone, this movie does look awesome. At first, it kind of has this look of like found footage or something, just because of the quality. But it's not found footage. I don't want to compare it to Chernobyl Diaries. One, I'm not a fan of that film, but two, kind of that found footage look. Just in quality, not camera movements or anything like that. But it really goes away after a while. It's kind of seamless, or you forget about it. but being shot on an iPhone, it's very raw and authentic. It's very intimate and claustrophobic because a lot of the shots are very up close, or it, it's either up close to characters or it's these big wide shots that really just show the room. And since it does take place in this mental hospital, being held against the character's will, it does have this claustrophobic feeling. So that very intimate closeness with characters and just that feel with that style of filmmaking does coincide with the atmosphere, the claustrophobic atmosphere being trapped in this hospital. And I remember when this was being advertised, the whole thing pretty much made it sound like a sane woman being held, against her will at this hospital, being treated like she's insane, being told she's insane even though she's not. But then you watch the movie and it kind of has this, which even on the poster it says, "Is she or isn't she?" It's kind of trying to hold you in the middle, like, well, is she actually sane, or is she there for a reason? And that alone is a cool premise, a cool setup for a psychological horror film. But there is this subplot that comes up very early in that does coincide with that, but it kind of definitely gives it away that early on. However, the a resolution of that subplot is satisfying, but that's not the ending of the film, because the other half of this movie is a stalker film. And the whole thing of being trapped, well, one, a sane person being held against her will in a mental hospital, that's one idea. The whole aspect of is she or isn't she, and how is this movie going to play out, and what's the answer to that, that's another way of going about it. But then throwing in the stalker element, which I always love stalker thrillers, that it feels like you have so much in this one idea that could play out so well that they don't really get to fully not explore, but they don't get to fully execute both ideas. Sane woman held in a hospital and the whole stalker aspect. And the stalker aspect is the one that really falls apart towards the end. For a movie that feels pretty original and ambitious, not just with the style of filmmaking, even though that is the most ambitious part of it. It even in story, the stalker portion eventually becomes a by the numbers stalker slasher, whatever. And that kind of brings it down. That was something I didn't really feel the first time I watched it, but this time it was definitely more evident. But it's very well acted. Claire Foy, she acts this very well. You can tell she's this woman who firmly believes she's there against her will, but as the movie goes on, I think she even starts to question it, kind of give up hope. Juno Temple's the only one I kind of had an issue with. She's kind of like this, I don't want to say ghetto, but like cornrows girl that carries a shank in her waistband. She has this southern accent, which no one else does, and she's not very good at it. She's just this wild chick that keeps starting problems with Claire Foy. And every time something happens, Claire Foy's character, Sawyer, is held responsible. Like every time Juno Temple starts a fight and she slaps her, she's the one that's reprimanded and it goes on her report. Jay Farrow plays this other patient who becomes Sawyer's friend. I'm not going to quite get into his actual role other than that. Well, okay. He's under this belief that the hospital is sort of fraudulently working in tandem, with the insurance company or just fraudulently going about their business. Like, as long as they keep their beds full, the insurance company will pay them. When the money stops, then they're cured and they can leave. That's what he believes. But he seems very normal. I don't want to say he's the black comic relief, but he is the character that does provide some levity to this film. Josh Leonard plays this orderly named George, who she believes is her stalker. That he's found her from Boston, and she believes he's found her. And that's one of the aspects of, okay, is she crazy? Is she not? Is she right about this guy? Or is this her PTSD? Because in the very beginning of the film, it it shows what stalking has done to her. You know, she takes her lunch at different hours. She doesn't use social media except for like a dating app. She even invites a guy over for a hookup from the dating app. But when they get to her apartment, she realizes what she's done and breaks down. She doesn't really call her mother too often. And yeah, she doesn't let people in. And she's really struggling with it. She seeks out support groups for stalking survivors. So, and Josh Leonard does well. There are some parts towards the end. He does go over the top a bit. But the whole movie does. The whole movie gets really silly as opposed to this very serious, well-crafted idea from like the first half. And other than that, I mean, Amy Irving from Carrie, she's Claire Foy's mother who finds out she's, as far as she knows, held against her will and is trying to get her out. Now, before I get to spoilers, it is very well acted across the board. It is very well shot. The only shots I didn't really care for is there's a couple GoPro shots. You see them in a lot of like chase scenes or something where you could tell there's a camera here, so like they're very still, but the background is very bouncy. I've never really been a fan of those anyway. But it's shot very well, and then it gets really stylish, like when there's a part where her meds get mixed up and she has like a psychotic, drug-induced breakdown. The way that's filmed, where it's like the back of her head, but like her face superimposed and just kind of sped up and showing how she's trashing the rec room. I like the more stylistic choices. It is a very good build-up, but then once it gets to that certain point towards the end, where it just goes over the top and becomes more by the numbers, it does set up some good ideas at that part in the very beginning, which I'll get to. So it's definitely worth checking out, especially just to see, what an iPhone can do. Because it doesn't look like a shot-on-shitio movie that you would probably expect when you hear, oh, this was all shot on a cell phone. But no, it's very ambitious in its filmmaking, very effective in its filmmaking. Also with its atmosphere, which is claustrophobic, and also very raw and intimate, just with the characters and the close-ups. But yeah, a very solid movie. I just have issues with just the clashing of different kinds of films or ideas. I would have rather it had been... Which, there are ways to mix the two, which I'll get into in spoilers. But I really do feel like this either should have been a stalker flick or, this sort of... It's been compared to Cure for Wellness, which I never saw. I know that's more sci-fi. But, either a stalker film or, this sane or insane woman being held at the hospital and we figure out if it's true or not. Or not even the mystery. Just, we know she's sane in just this horrible hospital. There's all these different ideas that really, when you get to the end of it, it really had to pick one route. and I will say it takes the stalker route. It just becomes very formulaic. But it's still very worth checking out. So it's on Hulu. Go check it out. And now I'm getting into spoilers. So fairly early on, when she first becomes friends with Jay Farrow, whose character's name is Nate, and he gives her the whole spiel about hospitals do this for, just to get paid by insurance. They have to have people there to get paid. So that's their... And the whole suicide ideation. They try to get you to say the slightest thing suicidal just so they can hold you, then insurance can pay them. Which the reason why she's held is because she's talking about being stalked and having to live in fear, but fear is normal. And the counselor says, well, that doesn't sound like a very good life. And all she says is, not one that I want to continue anyway. Pretty much meaning, I need to change. But of course they take it as, suicidal thoughts? Really? Which, and I'm sure this movie would scare people into not wanting to get help, because sometimes it is true. You go in there and, fart loud enough and say ow, they'll think you're a harm to yourself, and they'll hold you for however many days. But so that's his whole thing. And then we do find out very early on that Josh Leonard is the stalker, because he's the one that gives the meds to all the patients, and he holds up an envelope with her mother's address on it. And that's fairly early in the film, like before the halfway mark. So it really does, this movie does show its hand for both of those plots very early. And we see Josh Leonard going after her mother and watching as she gets close with Nate until he does something about that. And even the way they show Josh Leonard, at first it makes it feel like it's going to go that route of is she or isn't she? Because Josh Leonard, for the most part in the beginning, he's lit up from the back, which causes his face to be in shadow. So it could be like, obscured, maybe distorted. So maybe she's just seeing this guy David, just seeing his face. But then after they reveal that, they show Josh Leonard's face as is. And they try to make him look like a creep. He's got a beard. He's got the big Dahmer glasses. We do get the flashback of how she was in hospice, taking care of David's father, that he fell in love after the funeral of his father. He just kept blowing her up in texts, sending her flowers. She blocked his number and then, tried to get a restraining order. That's why she moved around like 450 miles away to get away from him. And that's one thing I have an issue with as far as convenience is she moved 450 miles away. Yet Josh Leonard was able to get a job where I'm pretty sure you need some sort of degree or something and get hired at this very hospital that she would eventually be committed to. I guess it's one of those sweater thread plots where once you pull that thread it all falls apart, but I probably could have forgiven that if the rest did become so formulaic and predictable. So that's whatever. So it shows its hand very early that Josh Leonard is the stalker. And we do get this great cameo by Matt Damon where he's sort of this stalker expert that shows her how to hide from your stalker and, totally beef up your security and live as a ghost. Even that one scene, Matt Damon is awesome in it. And, we see him go after her mother. He sees her getting close with Nate. And Nate says he's there as part of the opioid withdrawals. So he abducts Nate, takes him down to the basement, gives him electroshock, and then shoots him up with a bunch of fentanyl till he overdoses, then he leaves him make it look like he found it and OD'd. But then there's a news story that says he was actually like a journalist or something. Either a journalist or someone in law enforcement that was going undercover to figure out the shadiness of this hospital. And he had this diary full of notes about everything that happened. And, that's kind of how the movie gets resolved, is guys cleaning out his room, find the journal, then they turn it into the head of the hospital. But then a hiker finds this body out in the woods. It's turned in. They find the prints. It's George Shaw. Which the first time we see the body is just a hand, and we're supposed to believe it's her mother. But it's this guy, George Shaw, who Josh Leonard stole the identity of. And he's the one that gave her the wrong meds to make her look crazy. Every time she gets in a fight provoked by somebody else, like Juno Temple, she gets, in trouble for it. At one point, they even get in a fight caused by Juno Temple, and they take both of them, bring them back to their beds, which are right next to each other. But Sawyer gets put in solitary confinement, and then Josh Leonard comes down, professes his love, and you do get this really great scene that, if I'm not mistaken, was all one continuous shot, or if it wasn't, it's very entrancing, so I didn't really notice, because the performances are well done, where he's trying to profess his love and how they're supposed to be together, and she just breaks him down, like asking him who hurt him, who did this to you, you don't really love me, you love the idea of me, I'm this perfect, sweet, loving woman, but I'm actually just a bitch that's full of flaws. You won't love me. It just keeps going on, and eventually, she breaks him down for stalking her for 2 years. Like, you pathetic simpleton. There's even child murderers who, women come to visit in prison, saying things like, if a child killer can find someone to see the good in them, then surely there's a woman out there for you. People get pathetic enough. And it's very well acted through both, because we see Josh Leonard try to be the manipulator. And, well, I don't even know if he's really manipulated, because he himself believes everything he's saying. This, psychotic person, to be the one that's broken down and left weeping, and she goes from victim to being the one that just gets under his skin and says all this hurtful shit. Very well acted. But then the next day he comes back and saying how, hey, I changed your stay duration. As far as the hospital knows, you're supposed to be gone today. There's a door out back. We can go out to my cabin in the woods. I planned our whole future. You'll never have to go back to work. And then she brings up this point of, and this is where it starts to go downhill for me. Because concurrently, we see the cops figuring out the body was George Shaw. The journal somehow, well, the body, Nate ends up on the news, and it comes out that he was this person that was sent into the hospital, and now he's dead, so they think that was kind of shady, so the cops are looking into the hospital. Of course, they find the notebook, they arrest the head, and they shut everything down. Which, that was satisfying. And if they had just went with the sane woman held against her will, and had that be the resolution at the end, that would have been fine. That was even satisfying. But it turns into a very formulaic stalker film, because she plays this one last game with him where she's like, well, you say you love me, but, have you ever been with another woman? You have nothing to compare me to. You never had sex with another woman? You never dated another woman? You had nothing to compare me to. Like, sure, I can be your last, but I can't be your first. Like, I want you to have sex with another woman right in front of me. And this is when Leonard's performance kind of gets a bit over the top because it's all facial expressions. Even when she's talking, the camera's holding on him, and it's a lot of like shocked and confused. So she says, "Bring Violet down here, Juno Temple." So he does. Reason being is because when they first meet, after she throws a tampon at her, she shows her waistband and that she has a shank in it. So she tries to soothe Juno Temple, get her to calm down, grabs the shank, stabs him, and then this is where you can kind of start losing sympathy for Sawyer and know that she's just in this for herself. Because she's able to get to the door, open it, and then Josh Leonard grabs Juno Temple and she just pulls the door shut. Actually, even before he grabs her, she pulls the door shut on her, and then he grabs her and just snaps her neck. And then from that moment on, it's a formulaic stalker film. She makes the escape, which I like the way the escape was shot. Down low, upward, of her running from one end past the camera down to the other end. Makes it outside. She looks around, and of course, Josh Leonard comes around a corner, hits her. She's in the trunk of a car with this body, which it's in night vision. I guess it has to be. She feels the body, the necklace. She recognizes the crucifix as her mother. She's able to get out of the trunk. There's a chase in the woods. I do like how the woods is shot. It's this very deep blue, sort of dusk look. I really like the blue. However they made that look. So there's a chase. That's where you get the GoPro shot. He hits her in the ankle with a hammer. Which, another thing with his character is, it makes him seem like he's this very smart stalker that knows how to stay one step ahead of her, cover his tracks, do what he needs to, go about his business. But then when she suspects, hey, bring someone else down here. While you're at it, bring the craziest girl down here. He doesn't think that's sketchy. So he hits her in the ankle with a hammer. She pretends to be wounded. But I think she has keys or something. She stabs him in the eye that slits his throat. And then we just jump 6 months later, and it's the misery ending. She's back at her job. She sees this guy back in a booth far away, so she walks over with a knife. And I like how that's filmed. It's up close, very up close of her. Kind of a muffled audio, kind of it's in her head and she's getting anxious. But the guy turns around, it's someone else. And then she just runs out of the building and then freeze frame. So yeah, right after he kills Juno Temple and he starts chasing her, it becomes such a formulaic, just stalker, abduction, chase, survival act, final act of a movie like that. I mean, there were ways to go about this. He could have stalked her and made shit happen out in the world to make her look crazy, so that she's then committed in his world where he's an orderly. And then that could have happened. If you want to put the sane woman that's not in a hospital. Otherwise, I almost would have much rather been a sane woman from the beginning, is put there, kind of toy with the idea that she might be or might not be, only to ultimately find out that yes, it is this fraudulent, way to keep patients just so they can get paid. Still have that same, a resolution, but to me, it just feel like the two main plots, the A-B stories, didn't mesh very well. it really, they both kind of detracted from one another. And not only that, the movie showed its hand way too early. Because when Jay Farrow talks about, oh, it's because of insurance and all this stuff, we don't know that he's investigating this at first. But he's so normal and so calm that it's like, why is he there? Is like, he seems to really know. And as soon as he says it, it's kind of, oh, okay, so that is what's going on. And then they reveal that Josh Leonard is the stalker very early on. So it has no mystery, even though it starts out that way. It shows its hand too early, and yeah, the two plots, they definitely detract from one another, from reaching their fullest potential. But it's very ambitious with the filmmaking style, all shot on an iPhone, and it looks great. It's very well done. Looks awesome. It's stylish when it wants to be. Very well acted across the board. Again, the only thing that really bothered me would have been like Juno Temple's southern accent as far as acting goes. Even Matt Damon's one scene cameo was great. The score, very minimal. Not just in how it's composed, but where it's placed and how it's used. But I definitely love the opening and closing, just sort of a melancholic organ. Overall, it's still a good movie. It doesn't really get over the top or formulaic until that end portion. The build up is fine, but I do feel like both plots do take away from each other. But that is my thoughts on Unsane. Still a solid movie. So yeah, I'm glad I watched this again, because if I'd reviewed this after my first watch, I probably would have been positive all the way through. So I'm glad I watched it again, and that's why I'm going to go back and rewatch all the ones that I haven't reviewed yet. So I got a couple more of those I want to do, but yeah, thoughts on Unsane, and thank you for watching.